So I don't know about you guys, I constantly have these, I never thought I'd see the day moments that seems to happen like every month now, more than it used to. But here's the deal, we're raising our kids in a culture that is obsessed really with sex and sexuality and is very, very, very confused. And it is very much an anything goes idea. It used to be, we would ask the question, what is right? And then we kind of shifted to asking the question, what is right for me? And now everything is all about, I have a right. It's all autonomy, that I want to do my own thing. I really decide for myself, especially in this area now of gender and how do I feel, regardless of what my body was, made like. And it's just a confusing time. And there really is a lot of me that wishes we lived, I was telling the dads, in an earlier time. But this is where we're at. And so we got to cry out for wisdom. We can't bury our heads in the sand. We have to be the initiator of these conversations. And here's why. The culture is initiating these conversations. Okay? It's one of those things where it's gonna be talked about. Do you want to be the one who's guiding the conversation, or do you want to always be playing catch up? Right? Or correcting everything that they heard wrong. And so what I've tried to do with my kids is start and be the one to initiate these things so that they see me as the expert. They see me as someone who knows what's going on. And I shared with you dads last year, there's a really great email that I get every Friday called the Culture Translator. It's done by a group called Axis. And it just keeps me up to speed on a bunch of stuff going on in culture, because I don't have time to look everything up for the newest app or the newest song or what's going on in the music awards world or the newest video. I don't have time, but I love it because it informs me. And then it gives me like 2 or 3 questions to ask my kids and talk to them about. I like that. Okay? Here's the deal in this area of dating and love and romance and things like that. The first thing that I would share with you, and let me tell you a really, really quick history of adolescence, because you and I were raised in a culture that basically believed that, well, this is the way it's always been. And the truth is, it's only about 100 years old where we've ever even had a category called adolescence, where it's its own thing. Okay? Up until about the early 1900s, there was 2 categories of people, either children or adults. You could be a young adult, but there was very much this clear, we're calling you into manhood now, we're calling you into womanhood now. You've still got like the Jewish bar mitzvah that's going on. But that was the way it was. And so early, way back then, if you're like 13, 14, 15-year-old young man, and you see a girl, you are thinking about marriage. You're thinking, she could be a great wife. She could bear me many children. You're thinking family, and you're thinking, okay, how am I going to provide, and what trade have I learned, and how, and it was very much a, more of a grown-up thinking, right? So let me back up. In the mid-1800s, there was this guy named Charles Darwin. You heard of him?
Yes.
Origin of species by means of natural selection. Not a brand new idea, just at a right time when the culture really wanted it, but it caught on in a lot of ways. And there's a guy named Ernst Haeckel who was a university professor, and he had these drawings that he presented to people, and you'll probably remember these in your biology textbooks, maybe, where he showed all of these different stages of embryos, all these different animals going through these different stages in their embryos, and tried to show how they look alike, and how this proves that we're all related. Any of this making sense? You remember? And what he taught, though, was this idea that we repeat the stages of evolution in the womb. So all of us start out as this simple celled organism, just like life began millions of years ago. Then we all maybe turn into, we look like kind of like a fish thing, and you look at a human embryo, it's got like what looks like little gill slits, and then we have a tail, and then, right? And he lined up these different stages to make them look like they're all the same. Turns out later we find out that, well, what looks like gill slits are actually really important parts of the ear that are forming. The tail is actually our spine that has to form first, so everything else. And the truth is, he didn't line them all up correctly and left out some and made it look like they were all the same. And he got in trouble with his university and was disproven, but it had already caught on, partly because he had this catchy phrase called ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. And Darwin thought, this is great evidence for my beliefs. But again, it had been disproven, and now we know, even from embryonic studies, that that's not how we all go through those same stages. But it made it to our textbooks, like many things. Well, there was a guy named G. Stanley Hall in the late 1800s, early 1900s, very famous psychologist. He founded the American Psychological Association, very influential with people like Freud and Piaget and John Dewey. They were also influencers. And G. Stanley Hall was the first person to really promote and popularize this idea of adolescence. And here's why. Continuing on from what Haeckel presented, he believed that we continue evolution, demonstrating the stages of evolution on into the teen years, okay? About 12 or 13 up until about 23 to 25. And what he said was, when we're little kids running around, we're demonstrating primitive man, right? Very low verbal skills and things like that. And we're continuing to show evolution being repeated. And the final stage is really what he called adolescence. And the big thing about it, he had these words for it: storm and stress, because there's all this emotional turmoil, and there's still, childish things, but also adultish things. And so he invented this whole thing called adolescence. And he said, basically, this is another stage and group of people that need to be their own people. And here's the deal, you guys. You've been learning this week from Mark. Dads, we talked about it the other day. God's plan is one generation telling the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, the baton pass, right? Well, G. Stanley Hall taught the idea that actually teenage rebellion is good. Because if we're evolving and they're the ones that are driving evolution, they need to shake off all those things that have come before them to move us on to the next stage. So therefore, they need to be kind of treated separately and isolated from those younger and older than them. And it was a really popular idea about the early 1900s. Now, it didn't completely take on because we had a World War I and then a World War II, okay? But a lot of these ideas were influencing other people. John Dewey, okay, if you majored in education, you know that he was very influential in modern education and things like that. John Dewey really liked what G. Stanley Hall had to say. And if you didn't know any better, you'd think John Dewey was this great guy, but he was one of the drafters and signers of the 1833 Humanist Manifesto. The declaration shaking its fist against God: no deity will save us, we must save ourselves. Science is the answer, morals are relative. And it was this big declaration made by these, what they called religious humanists at the time. They called themselves religious at the time. But these are the people that influenced the early 1900s in the way that we split everybody up by age and stage in our schools. And unfortunately, the churches just kind of adopted that way of thinking things and baptized it and just said, okay, we'll do that too. Okay? But this idea of adolescence didn't really catch on until the 1950s. World War II's over. And so now, for the first time in our culture ever, you've got this own subculture of the teenage years, of their own music, their own hairstyle and dress and things like that, right? That's the first time we've ever had that. You've got James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause, kind of that, there's angst, all this stuff going on. If you watch that movie, by the way, the reason he's upset about his life is his dad is a wimp, by the way. So, man, you can go watch that movie again with fresh eyes. But this is when, listen to this, modern dating began. If you want something fun to do, to watch, go to Google and type in 1950s public service advertisements, dating, how to date. And you'll find all of these things they put out. It looks like Leave It to Beaver. It's in black and white. It's like, how do you ask a girl on a date? And it's like, shows like 3 options on how do you, make a phone call. Then what do you do on a date? And then how do you say goodnight? And it was the first time that dating was really just for fun. And it probably started really innocent, right? We're just going to go to the sock hop or something. But what it began to do was cultivate this idea, well, we're going steady, but we're cultivating these romantic relationships that aren't purposefully marriage bound. Does that make sense? Like, we're just having fun. Which, again, seems innocent, but it began to morph into this. And then you've got the 60s and 70s with sexual revolution and other stuff happening in our culture, morality and stuff. You can blame the Beatles, whatever you want to do, but things were going in a different direction. And really, if you look at the divorce statistics around the 60s and 70s, they just began to take off, right? So what was going on here? What's this new culprit? What's wrong with what I call recreational romance? Well, the problem is we began to think in terms of love as being in love is these feelings that we have and we're having a good time. And so going steady with someone, or just when I was in junior high, I was just going with someone, because you'd finally just say, will you go with me? Right? And your parents are like, what do you mean go with you where? Like, you're so out of it, Mom. You know, it's like, we're a couple now, but here's the weird thing. It's this quasi-committed relationship. Not really covenant, but we understand, we've had the talk, right? The DTR talk, define the relationship talk. And now there's exclusive rights to each other that other people can't share. Like, I can hold your hand. I can put my arm around your waist. Like, if we go to a dance, you're the only one that I dance with, right? And then, you know, we might use words like, I love you. And there might be kissing involved. And there's again, it's exclusiveness going on. And so we began to think, okay, so this is what love is. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, for the most part, if you think back to your junior high and even high school relationships, there's always exceptions, but most of them didn't last, right? The first people that you dated or went steady with, I dated a girl for 2 years, which was like marriage when you're in high school, right? It's like you're really serious. But you've just got this idea that, well, we're in love. Now, here is the deal. People tell me, because we decided we're not going to do that. What I saw when I was a youth pastor was when a breakup happened, it was like a mini divorce in the youth group. Like, people were hurt, and then people were taking sides, and her friends are mad at him, and his friends are, and like I've had parents mad at other parents because your son broke my daughter's heart, like all of this crazy stuff. And then even though they're broken up, like the new girl comes in the youth group and he's talking to her, and she's mad because it's too soon after the breakup, and it's like drama. And I'm like, I think this is exactly what Satan would want in my youth group. Like all of this confusion and backbiting and hatred and stuff, right? Plus, you add in there the sexual temptation of just being alone with someone, or, you know, kissing can lead to more, those kinds of things. You've got all of this crazy stuff that's going on. And so Katie and I just decided, we're not going to do that. We're not going to, no, and we did that. Like, we did kind of recreational romance, but we decided we're just not going to do that. So when our kids were little, you know, and the little granny at church would be talking to Jordan like, well, how many girlfriends do you have? You know, really innocent thing, and we're just like, we don't have, all girls are our friends. You know, we're just trying to, we're not doing that thing, right? But then it got into the later years, what are you going to do? And as we said, we're just not going to do that dating thing. We're going to be more, you can call it purposeful dating. Some people call it courting. There's a lot of baggage associated with that name when you say courting, because it sounds more like, I'll trade you your daughter for 2 sows, and like you've got all these, you've got these other ideas, but you can call it what you want. We call it purposeful dating. And the goal is to not pursue relationships that are not marriage bound. Now again, it doesn't mean you don't know right away, but we're going into it understanding, like, I am trying to figure out, is this person a potential mate? I'm not going in just because I need a girlfriend or because my friend said, who do you like? I don't like anybody. Well, if you did like somebody, who'd you like? Well, I don't like it. Like, they always want to know, right? It's this drama going on here. So people said to us, but how are they going to learn to be in love? And this is like practicing for marriage. Don't you want them to practice for marriage, right? And so my response was to parents, and I did this with my young people, is I would take out a whiteboard and I would draw a line down the middle and I would write dating on one side. And I would say, tell me all the reasons why young people break up, right? Junior high, high school, maybe even into college. And they would begin to list some things. So generally they're the same. We just fell out of love, or we fight all the time, or someone better came along, or they cheated. Going in 2 different directions. A lot of guys are like, it's too expensive. You know, there's different reasons why. And so what I'm like, okay, so those are all the reasons, right? We got that. So what that means, the system is that we're a couple, and we use romantic words, and we have exclusive rights to each other's body, and I give you my emotions, and we might use words like I love you, and I can hold your hand and hug you, and maybe we'll kiss, and maybe we're going to struggle with that, but it's like, but alone, we're just you and me. But then if one of these reasons comes up, we break up, and I rip my heart back, you know, and it hurts. And the girls talk to the girls, and they, you know, the guys are, you know, maybe heartbroken or listen to country songs or Chicago. I don't know, whatever. Whatever it is, it's like, oh, all this angst and heartache. But then what am I doing now? Okay, so who now am I going to give my heart to and say I love you and be in this quasi-committed relationship where we kind of follow these rules, but if some of them get broken, then we break up and I rip it back. Right? Does that make sense? So then I go back to my diagram here, and on the right side, I write the word divorce. And I say, now, everyone tell me all the reasons why people get divorced. Can you guess where I'm going with this? It's the same list. So I go, so I don't think we're practicing for marriage here. I think we're training our hearts, we're practicing for divorce. We're teaching ourselves, this is what love feels like, and this is what people in love do, and how they talk. But if one of these reasons comes up, I'm not in love anymore. Right? And we break it off. And we know that's not how you respond to conflict, and how you respond to, well, we disagree all the time, or we have intense fellowship, whatever you want to call it. But you realize, like, well, you're in it. But there's this out, and so what happens is marriage just becomes glorified dating. That I carry that concept of love into my marriage, thinking I know what it means to be in love, and I really probably don't, because it's all been recreational. But again, this time I want it to stick. But it's almost like sticking, duct tape too many times. Eventually, it loses its stickiness. There's not so much of the wow and the new and the wonder and stuff. It's like I've been here before, and now my feelings are just telling me something else. And I'm telling you guys, even at family camp, I've talked to many men who want to walk away from their family. And I hearken back to my youth pastor days, and I've talked to young men who are going to break up with their girlfriend, and I feel like I'm talking to the same person. It's the same stuff. But we know it's more serious. We know there's a bigger train wreck behind. There's more damage. But this is what we're training our kids. And so again, Katie and I were like, we're just not going to do that. And it helped as a youth pastor that I had a lot of examples of really bad relationships. I'm like, remember so-and-so? Okay, right. Remember? Like, that didn't work out right. And so I could do that. So we decided we're not going to do this. And then, again, you guys, you couple in there, there's only a few things in the New Testament that we are told to flee from. Like, run away. Monty Python, run away. Like, run away. Get away from him. Yeah. And porneo is one of them. Flee from sexual immorality. Paul said there shouldn't even be a hint of it. That's where we get the word pornography, right? So anything that is outside of God's plan for husband-wife sexual relationships is porneo. That's what was in that category. And Paul said, listen, flee from sexual immorality. It's a sin against your own body. You're taking the temple of the Holy Spirit and you're uniting it. Like you got to run away from the thing. It is powerful. Not because it's bad, because it's powerful. Sex is a great thing created by God that we want to celebrate in the right context. Right? So, you've got that. You've got, Paul said to the Thessalonians, here's a good example. He said, listen, it's God's will that you be sanctified, set apart, made holy. That you should abstain from porneo. And this is important, that each of you should learn to control his own body in a way that's holy and honorable. Not in passionate lust like non-believers. Like, of course they're going to, they just got their flesh driving them and stuff. Not in passionate lust like the heathen who don't know God. Because you're different. You do know God, right? And he goes on, he says, and that in this manner no one should wrong each other or defraud each other. Right? And it says, because God hasn't called us to live impure lives, but holy lives. It keeps going back to holy. And then it says, if you reject this instruction, you're rejecting God. This isn't just my opinion. So it's a big deal. In Hebrews 13, it says, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure. Right? Really important words. So in general, I want to remind you, our kids are watching us to see, so what's marriage like? And I always want to remind us, regardless of what I say, am I modeling for my kids something where my kids would be like, okay, that looks great. Because I've heard kids in Right Night, I overheard a kid saying to his parents, why would I want a marriage like yours? Why would I want to get married? Wow. And the parents are like, well, next question. Like, it's like really tough. Again, God can redeem anything, and God is all at work in the lives of our kids and stuff. But it starts with, am I excited about this, and am I sharing with them a biblical view of this? Okay? So, those are the dangers. And I'll tell you this, since we're all adults in here. When my wife kisses me romantically and passionately, or holds herself close to me, I get excited. So my question is that my flesh? Is that my sin nature? Getting excited? No.
That pleases God.
It's called biology. It's designed by God to get me excited. Those are exciting things. Let me just back this up. I hope this isn't too bad for me to say, but whenever Katie and I have sex, we kiss, okay? Like that's part of the deal there, and it gets the motor running, and it's called an on-ramp. The purpose of an on-ramp, it has one purpose, to get you up to speed.
Preach that.
Right? All of these things that I'll tell you, I used to tell my kids, well, you can go as far as you want, just don't kiss. And then I'm like, but I get excited when Katie and I kiss passionately. And you guys know that kissing can become sexual or very erotic, right? And so what we're telling them is, we'll step in the river of passion and you feel that current and stuff, but just if you start to feel yourself getting too deep, get out or just stop. And then you're like, I don't want to stop, but we're telling our kids to stop. So regardless of where you land on that, I will just tell you that my son Jordan took this hook, line, and sinker, and his first kiss was at the altar with my daughter-in-law, and they were never tempted sexually. Okay? When Katie and I were tempted sexually, the only thing that cured us was when we stopped kissing. Okay? I'm just telling you, we were like, all right, we're gonna have to do like a high five at the end of the night or something, but like we just can't. I want to go further. And we were seeking Jesus. Okay? So when I was a youth pastor, I had kids that weren't, and they're dating, I'm like, okay, you're probably having sex, right? Because it's just like, if I was really trying to pursue the Lord, and Katie and I were wrestling with this, man. But now you guys, it's another level deeper. We've got this culture that is telling our daughters to be sexy. I mean, sexy is the word used for everything, right? And you're supposed to show your bra strap. You're supposed to take the peace and pout, photo. You're supposed to send, whatever it is. But this is the culture. And then you've got porn all bombarding our guys. You've got all of this stuff. And then you've just got our own fleshly desires. And then you've got biology in there. And we're telling our kids, okay, go be alone exclusively, slow dance, go to inspiration point stuff. Just don't have sex. And it's just like, I don't think I'm helping them in this. Okay? So my goal is to help them. And what I constantly reminded my kids was, I am on your side. I want you to know that I want you to have an awesome marriage, an awesome love life where you experience the joy of sex and the thrill of sex, and it's all this wonderful thing. So when I'm giving you these guidelines, I really am on your side. Okay? And so it's kind of like the earlier you start with them, the easier it is for them to kind of get the hang of this. I don't know if a lot of you guys remember, like the late 90s when I Kissed Dating Goodbye came out by Joshua Harris. It took off, and like in our little homeschool communities, like parents are like, that's what we're doing. We are now, and this is now our courting parlor, and everything. The kids were like, what are you talking about? Like, you're just throwing this thing on us. And it's not what the parents did, and it was like all of a sudden. And so it's easier from when they're younger to try to instill in them the principles behind here. I share that with you to remind you that we can have really great intentions and motives and have all of the biblical reasoning behind it, but it's got to become their own choices at some point. And we can't always micromanage or helicopter everything that they do, right? Even in a perfect environment called the Garden of Eden with a perfect father called God, his children still made bad choices, okay? So not to let us off the hook, but to still go, okay, I'm going to still propose that this is going to be our plan. With our daughter, we had a little 13-year-old ceremony where it was like, this is what you're committing to do. Here's what I'm committing to do. I'm committing to guard your heart. And she agreed that any potential suitors would come talk to me. And that's just kind of the arrangement that we said that we have. And I told them, I can't control who you like. I can't control that. We can control what you do with it, though. And we're here to help guide you through this process, to help you think clearly when your feelings or hormones or friends or the culture's telling you something different. We're here for you in that. But this is how it's going to be. Katie will tell you that when her dad got saved and they had changes and she was a little eighth grade girl with a stubborn, strong personality, and her dad said, now, here's what's going to happen. Boys are going to... She was really furious at her dad. But he always, when she was tough, he was tougher. And he basically just said, I'm not answering to you. I'm not responsible to you. This is what our convictions are. So again, that's all with parenting and how you've got to deal with that and what your standards are going to be. For us, it's always just been your circle of freedom. Gets bigger or smaller based on your attitude and your responsibility. That if you're showing responsibility and you've got a great attitude and stuff, I trust you. But if it gets broken, then you're very small circle, And that's important to earn back trust if it gets broken. But those were our plans, and that's what we did. And we just wanted it to be more of a responsible thing, that if our son wants to pursue a girl, he goes to her father and talks to her father. And some dads are like, why are you talking to me? We're like, whether or not he understands it, this is the right thing to do. Because when I walk Annabeth down the aisle and hand her over, that's not just like, well, that's just a tradition that we do. It's representing the authority that I have, that until she gets married, it's my authority. And you see that in Scripture, in the Old Testament, that was the way it worked, that the fathers were responsible in passing, it's a really important thing for us to see our role that way. So, that was our deal. And so instead of doing dating, we would do like, well, if you want to spend time with this girl and get to know her, invite her over to our house, or go to her house, or double date with people that we know or trust, or you can go to the dance, and there's our kids learn how to do like, the box step kind of a thing, and they would go to our little school dances that we have. But again, we're very big on, we're not doing the exclusive boyfriend-girlfriend thing until you're older. And it's going to be based on how you are. I'm not going to tell you 18 is the age, because I don't want you to miss the point behind all of this and think like that's all it is. The birthday means now I'm mature. Jordan could have started this at 15 and been fine, whereas, other kids, haven't done that. So that's been our plan. That's been our standard. And the thing to realize is the world's going to think that's weird. A lot of people in your church are going to think that's weird. You might think that's weird, but this is just what we landed on. And our goal is we're just not going to go with the way the world has just led us into thinking about teenage years. Because, now we've pushed that into the late 20s, even into the 30s, this adolescence idea, where you don't have to grow up. Hakuna Matata, until you want to take your place at Pride Rock. Stay a young person as long as you want. And nowadays, a 28-year-old man is no more marriable than he was when he was 18. I mean, as far as taking responsibility and stepping up and thinking about providing and things like that. So our goal was we're going to have a manhood ceremony, and I'm going to expect more of you, and I'm calling you out as a man. We did a fun thing we can talk about. Any of you guys want to talk about it another time, but we just really wanted to call them out of childhood into the adult world, different than our culture. And that's just something that we've lost nowadays, this art of kind of expecting more of them. And that was how we did it. So, it's 8:33.